Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Twitter like we are each and every single week, with the exception of, well, kind of the last week and the last week and a half. Do not attempt to adjust your sets. We are back. I am back. It is not just Ibby flying solo, although I have to give a shout out to my partner because not only did he rock it flying solo, I listened to the whole show, but on YouTube, it's like our fifth most watched show. So I think I officially might be holding back the show and holding back the brilliance that is Matt Ibby Ibanez. That said, John Sapanaro out in Los Angeles, California, and the aforementioned Ibby holding it down in New Jersey. Ibby, it has been a long time since we've seen each other doing this show. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, John. You hopped on before we hit record, and I was like, I feel like I haven't seen you in forever, and it's good to be back. It's good to be, the show's not the same when it's not the two of us, and I'm excited to get things rolling, even though some of the things we're going to be talking about today are probably going to be not the most funnest of things, but we got the chat here. It always helps, and they did a great job. Again, shout out to the chat. Last time I was on here, I was really, like I said, I was nervous, but I was so happy that the chat was really giving some good intel and really painting the picture of what this Mets season has been, and I was able to really feed off of them. So shout out to them. So thank you for that. As for me, doing well. Burnt to shit because I've been working out in the sun so much with my summer job. But the weather's been crazy here on the East Coast for being so hot. But I'm doing well, and I'm pumped up to talk some Mets, talk about the break, talk about what could be ahead for this team. And I'm not sure where my thoughts are going to lie in comparison to yours. I'm so excited to see that dynamic because I said some things on my solo show. You listened. I said some things that were a little bit different than what we normally do, but I was really just, it's the way I felt, and not much has changed. Some has changed, but not much. So I'm very curious to see where our conversation goes today.
Well, let's jump into the comments real quick. Speaking of the conversation, speaking of those folks, we got a couple people shouting you out. Shay saying claps for Ibby, LOL. Hey, Douglas Barnes saying Ibby crushed it. PB saying we had a great time without John. You got this. Okay. I don't know if that's a positive to you or negative to me. A little bit of both. I'm not sure. Jeff Cohen saying Ibby was on fire. And then we got a string of funny comments. PB saying I'm stuck in a hot subway, no trains. And then somebody says that sucks. And then, yes, it does. The one day I didn't carry my pods too, so I can't listen. And then we have Douglas Barnes saying, don't worry, PB. I'm sure you can still hear John because I am loud as fuck all the time. We have Stevie Mack saying, hit the like button, mofos. Yes, if you like what you're watching, listen to, hit the like button. But, when you're watching here on YouTube, those comments, those questions, those concerns, those compliments, those disses, whatever they may be, come in real time. So we appreciate it because it's the best way for you to be a full-fledged member of the show. We got Keith Media Goon checking in saying it's the black cap you wear on the show. It brings folks down. Maybe.
Oh my God.
Listen, there's a lot to talk about with the Mets. There's a lot of different places we can go, obviously, because we didn't do a show last week. And I do want to say, in all seriousness, Ibby, shout out to you for holding it down 2 weeks ago. I was in the busiest stretch of my season at work, and I was on location for a week in Nashville, and I kind of knew ahead of time. Ibby and I talked off the show and saying, look, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm going to be free. I don't know if I'm going to have the time to make this happen, maybe bring in a guest host. There's too much going on. I don't think we can not do the show. And in all seriousness, he did take it on himself, and a testament to you and a testament to all the people in the comments. It was really great. And then last week, a little bit of the same. It was right after the 4th of July holiday. And honestly, on 4th of July, I flew straight to Arizona to watch the Mets at Chase Field. And my flight was pretty late Wednesday, and I couldn't get back in time to do it. And Ibby was like, look, man, I was going to do it, but I'm beat. I'm tired. Yeah. I've been working outside. And so, but I did feel like heading into the break, normally we take this week off. Over the past 2 years, we've taken the All-Star break as the break. We've kind of wrapped up the week before, and then we come back and preview the week after. So this is a little bit of a different function than we've done, but I also think this works, and I think that mentally, we all needed a break from the New York Mets because I don't know.
Another thing, one of the main reasons why I wanted to take last week off, like I would have powered through if I really wanted to, but the big thing was the Mets were playing well, but I didn't know if it was for real or not. So I was like, I wanted to let that stretch I wanted July to like play out a little bit more. So when we came back the following week, we would have a little bit more of an idea of what this team might be, heading towards the trade deadline, heading into the break. And I thought that added time would have helped. And, for me, I mean, not to be a spoiler just yet, but, not too much has changed in my end.
It's a little bit of a shame because obviously the Mets were in the midst of a really nice streak, and I was fortunate enough to be in the house for 2 of those wins. I got to see the the kind of messy, ugly win on the 4th of July in Arizona, and obviously then the next 2 wins were a lot better, a lot more encouraging, right? Because the Mets did some heroic things, and then the Mets went on an absolute tear in that last game. Then I went to the Friday night game in San Diego, which was a ton of fun, super exciting game. I got into an argument with a Padres fan. We can talk about that later. Real dipshit kind of person. I'm not the type of person, believe it or not, none of you are going to believe me when I say this, but I'm not the type of person who argues with people at baseball stadiums. I usually go, and I'm very respectful of the fact, especially that when I'm in a visiting stadium or visiting for the Mets,
And way back.
Yeah, listen, you're just having fun, and there was this one guy that was just like a total dipshit, and I was just like, I told him, I look back, I was like, you're an embarrassment to your entire family. It was like a guy old enough to be my dad. So, okay, we'll get into it now real quick, because I feel like I'm very in the lead on this one. Shay saying, John, did you go to all the games in San Diego? No, I just went to the first one, the Friday night game. And so what happened was I was invited by one of my buddies who lives in San Diego, who is a Padres fan. And, super nice to invite me and bring me down. And I'm sitting in this section, and there's like no Mets fans but me. And just by happenstance, the 2 guys to my right? Like my buddy's sitting on the left, and there were 2 guys sitting to my right that happened to be Mets fans. And that was it for the entire section. So there was that play late in the game. I think it was the 7th inning when Lindor slides into second, and he's ruled safe, and they put it under review. Right. And then the first couple angles show you that maybe he was out. And at the time, we had developed like a little bit of a rapport in that section. I'm kind of talking to other Padres fans and stuff, and we're joking around and stuff. And I'm like, look, none of these angles show it. Then they finally show the angle that was the one that wanted to be the decisive one, where it seems like Lindor kind of moved his body out of the way a little bit, and the guy tagged the dirt. He didn't tag Lindor. He kind of put the glove down where Lindor was going to be, and he doesn't get Lindor. He gets the dirt. They rule him safe. Right. So at that point now, it's the 7th inning. Like I said, I had built up a pretty nice rapport in this section. I'm talking to Mets fans. I'm talking to Padres fans. We're just kind of hanging out. So they rule him safe, and I just kind of got up, and I did the safe gesture. And the guy like 3 rows behind me just goes, older guy too, like old enough to be my dad, is like, hey, sit down. Nobody wants to hear from you.
Ooh.
And I looked at him and I was like, what? And he's like, look around. Nobody wants to hear from you. You can't see it from here anyway. I'm like, I just saw it on the giant big screen like everybody else. I wasn't doing it prematurely. I did it after they ruled him safe. And he's like, yeah, what would you do if I was in New York doing this? And I was like, nothing. None of us would
what are you
do
gonna
anything,
do? We're gonna
dude.
do anything.
How thin-skinned could you be? So now he's going, just sit down. Just sit down. And I looked at him and I was like, you're a miserable bastard, and you're an embarrassment to your entire family sitting here that you have to say this to me. And that was it. Then I sat down, and then I got the ultimate. Now I know the Mets lost 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But I got the ultimate revenge, because obviously the game goes into extras, right? The Mets squander another chance late in the game with the Starling Marte, and then they put up that 5 spot in the 10th inning. Right. And I turn around, and guess who is leaving? That guy and his whole family. So I stood up and I turned around and I was like, where are you going? Hey, where are you going? What are you doing?
Oh, God.
And then, of course, the entire section laughed. Padres fans, Mets fans, the entire section laughed. And I was like, you guys are cool. That guy's just a dick. And they were like, no, that guy is a dick. I don't know why he did that. And I was like, yeah. So anyway, that was my San Diego story. That was the highlight. And it was worth it because I needed a moment like that. And more importantly, and all jokes aside, I needed the Mets to win that game because it took me 4 hours and 40 minutes to get to San Diego from LA. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that trip, it should take about 2 hours. So it took me double the time to get down there. So if the Mets would have lost, even my buddy who is a Padres fan was like, honestly, man, I live 15 minutes from here. I'm happy the Mets won just for you driving down here,
for that trek,
sitting down here in 4.5 hours of traffic. So anyway, that is the story. I do want to shout out a couple people here. Rail saying, "Hey peeps, sorry I'm late." We got Felix Ortiz. Hello. We got Chris Ram jumping in. Hello. So, hello to everybody. And thanks for putting up with that story. But that's what happened to me, Ibby, down in San Diego.
Was liquor playing a part on either end?
No, I mean, I had 2 beers over the course of the entire game.
Okay. That's okay.
And again, I drove down and I was driving back. So like, I was not, like I had a beer and food, and then I had another smaller beer, like, I was not drinking. Yeah. And I don't know if the other guy was. He just seemed crotchety. Like, honestly, like I said, the entire section was like, what is this dude's deal?
Well,
like,
I mean, the only thing I could say on his end is like, it's similar to like the malaise of Mets fans right now, because the Padres thought they'd be a lot hotter than what they are. And they've kind of been middling, in comparison to the money that they spent, the players that they have. They thought they'd be a lot better. Maybe he's just a little bit older, a little bit longer in the tooth as a fan, thinking he was going to get something big. And he's stuck with kind of like this mediocre team at the moment.
Yeah, which, listen, obviously we can empathize with as Mets fans. And sincerely, like, all I did, like, I didn't even get up and like yell and taunt. I literally just stood up and like gestured safe. And I was about to sit down when he was like, sit down. Nobody wants that shit. Keith Blacknick saying maybe he used to own Bally Sports Network. That would explain a lot. That would explain a lot because I don't even know if you can watch the Padres games unless you go in person nowadays.
My God.
So anyway, listen, this is also a great point from Keith. How can you be that cranky in San Diego? It's true. It's true.
Beautiful out there.
It is beautiful. It was a predictably beautiful day. It was the perfect day for a ball game. It's a beautiful stadium. Yeah. The food is good. Like, I had never, the other times I had been down there, I had eaten before I got down. And so I didn't have a chance to like walk around the ballpark and get food. The food is great. The drink selection is great. Obviously, the ambiance of that stadium is beautiful. It's a terrific place to watch a ball game. And I understand that the Padres aren't doing that good. And I understand that, he probably looked at me like a rude New Yorker or whatever, but like, he was the one being rude. I stood up, gestured safe twice, and I was sitting down. I was about to sit. I was just playing around. And again, it was the 7th inning. Like, I had already demonstrated that I was sitting there being chill. It was a back and forth game. Eventually, like, I want to be able to root for my team.
And it's not like you were doing the classic thing where it's like you're looking around and doing and making the gesture, or like making it a point to everybody else, like you're that fan. Like, you weren't even doing that. You're literally just looking ahead to be like, say I'm bad, then sit down, and then he decides to be a jerk.
And it might have been a little bit for the people in front of me who, again, like, there were a couple Padres fans in the first few rows in front of us, and we were joking around, and we had built up, a little bit of like, kind of talking back and forth, just talking baseball too. And maybe it was a little bit at them, but like, again, he doesn't know that because he's sitting 3 rows behind me.
Right.
Like, he didn't see what I was doing. Anyway, that's the story from San Diego. It's a great place to see a ball game. And that might be, who knows, based on my schedule and the Mets schedule, that might be the last live Mets game I get to see this season. So, kind of went out with a bang, going to San Diego and going to Chase Field. It was my first time at Chase Field.
That place looks beautiful.
It was great. Chase Field's a little weird because it's like an older, new ballpark. And if any of you guys have ever been to Arizona or San Diego for games, I know Shay probably has because he lives out here. I'm sure Keith has with the 7 line and stuff. Chase Field is cool, but you could tell it's an older, new ballpark, if that oxymoron makes sense, because some of the sight lines are weird. You can't really see the video board unless you're in certain sections. They don't have like a lot of auxiliary stuff. They play this is the only ballpark I've ever been to where they play the radio broadcast on the concourse. not just in the bathrooms,
Oh, okay.
on the
On the
concourse.
concourse. Okay.
It's really, really weird. Honestly, it's
Yeah.
very strange. And Jeff Cohen saying Chase Field feels like an airport hangar. It kind of does.
The one shot that you posted on your Instagram, like that place looked huge. I don't know if it was just the angle. It looked freaking huge.
It's honestly, it's a little deceptive because I agree. In that picture, it looks massive. Sitting there and taking that picture with the roof closed, it looks small.
Oh,
it's the opposite. Okay. I think the picture makes it seem like, wow, that's so far away and everything's so big. Yeah. When you're sitting there and the roof is closed, it feels, I mean, it's a massive stadium, so you don't feel claustrophobic. That would be ridiculous. But it does feel like low. You know, you're like, oh, like the roof's like right over my head. Whereas it doesn't feel that way at whatever they call it now, Lone Depot Park in Miami. Doesn't feel that way.
Oh yeah, the lowercase L.
Yeah, Seattle T-Mobile Park, where they just had the All-Star game. That place with the roof closed doesn't feel that way. And even another place with a retractable roof, Miller Park, or I don't know if they still call it that, in Milwaukee. You know, when that dome is closed, it doesn't feel that way. There's something about Chase Field that just feels like tiny and you know, a little tight in there. This. We'll get into the Mets conversation here in a second, but this is a fun tangent to be on. Felix saying, I ain't going to San Diego Padres game. The stadium's full of losers. Keith Blacknick saying, Chase is cool, but not in my top 5. The pool suite is cool and weird at the same time. Yeah, the pool's kind of weird. It's I guess it's cool if you buy that whole thing and you can go in it, but like I don't know, whatever. And then Rael bringing this up, and this is where we'll do this quick offshoot. You bought one of those Padres City Connect jerseys for when you change careers to become a poolside surfer, right? Ibby, the reason why I bring that up is because you and I have differing opinions on the Padres City Connect jerseys. Ibby and I were texting about this. Why don't you let them know what your thoughts are?
I texted John because he posted a picture from his seat, and the people in front of him were wearing the Padres City Connect jerseys.
As were the Padres that night.
As were the Padres that night. And I said to him, as I'm watching the game too, I was like, I sent him a message. I was like, please just take those jerseys and just burn them with fire. Just burn them. And his response to me, because I think that they're ugly as hell. I really do. And his response to me was, you know, hate to break it to you, but you know, I kind of like them. They're in my top 5 when it comes to the City Connects. And I was like, let's save this for the show. And then
they are without thinking like without going through the list, and maybe, you know, next year when the Mets get theirs and the final round of teams and all 30 teams will have City Connect jerseys, you know, this is a good off-season conversation or something we could talk about and really break it down. But I like them. Keith has a good point. They seem like they're better for Miami than San Diego.
Miami City Connects, I think, are great. I love those.
Well, that's the thing. They do feel beachy and tropical and all this stuff. And I think because the Miami ones are so inherently Miami, like they have a great, like, you know, they feel Cuban. Like they feel like they're inherently, you know, a part of that neighborhood, like in a part of the culture that's there. You know, it would have been almost a waste to give, you know, this beach vibes, Miami Vice style, because the Miami Heat kind of have those Miami Vice style jerseys anyway. So I think it would have been a little bit of a waste to give those to Miami, because I think the Miami ones are one of the few that really nailed it. But I like them because they're very different. You know, they are a little ugly and busy, but I just think, like, if you're going to do them, like, do them like go hard, like go hard all the way in and really like pick something, like, you know, the one that says like Cincy, the black Cincinnati Reds. Like to me, that's boring. Like to me, it's just very, very boring. That's kind of how I feel about it. So I feel like, you know, just be bold.
Like I said, we'll save the conversation because I think there are a lot of cool City Connectors. Some that really hit it out of the park, some that really swung and missed, some that kind of went halfway. Like just real quick, I love the Seattle ones, but I would love them that much more if the pants were white, but they went black. So it's like there are little things here and there that kind of hit and don't, but again, better for an off-season conversation. Yeah. But the Padres ones for me, not so much, especially within the rankings of all the ones that we've seen to this point.
Fair enough. And yeah, we can definitely save that for another time altogether. But this is a great comment from Shay. I feel like the Padres need to wear leg warmers with their City Connects. because they look like Flashdance or something.
They do, yeah. That's good.
Yeah, Keith Black. I'm sorry, I'm trying to put this conversation to bed. Keith saying Cincy should have Skyline or Chili. No, they should. Like, I think, like Pittsburgh, I think their jerseys, the City Connect jerseys look cool, but then they put like PGH. Like, why wouldn't they say Steel City? Why wouldn't they say Steel City?
Right.
That's such an easy one. And so, like, why wouldn't you have, instead of Cincy, why wouldn't it say Queen City? Why wouldn't it say Skyline City? Like, why wouldn't it say something else instead of Cincy? Same thing with Baltimore. Maryland has one of the coolest flags.
Yeah.
It's busy. It's weird. And then they were like, yeah, we put it on the inside of the collar so that when you open the button, you could see it a little bit. Everything else, though, black and white. Like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
What are you doing? There's so many things they could have tapped into. Douglas Barnes, and this will be the last one. They're obnoxious, and John likes them. That's kind of. Listen, I like what I like. It's called fashion. Look it up. I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's talk about these Mets.
Let's talk about it. Yeah, let's do this.
Look, they had a nice run, Ibby. I don't think that the win streak was meaningless. I don't, but I think it would have been nice. They didn't have to sweep, but it would have been nice to at least win that series going into the All-Star break to say, hey, you know what? We had a 6-game winning streak. It was snapped. We won the series, though. We're feeling good. We get to take a break. We get to reset, and we come out of it. So my question to you is, how much did the 2 games that they lost to the Padres right before the break, how much did that ruin the good vibes of the win streak for you personally?
For me personally, it took the air out of the sails. It really did for me, because like they're riding high, and it's like, look, it's a lot to ask for a team to go 7 in a row. Like, look, putting together a win streak like that outside of what we all know Atlanta does, because they never freaking lose. But it's tough to just always win. But I would have thought if they were able to win out and get into the break and be what they would have been at that point, maybe 2 games under. I think it's close to something like that, as opposed to where they are. I think it would have changed the narrative and feel for this team in general. Now, maybe you differ on that, but for me, that's kind of where I am. And from what I've seen from others, I feel like that's kind of where they are as well. But the losses, I don't want to say like the losses like completely mean second half is completely, done for. But at the same time, I've been saying this. I said this on the solo show. I really think no matter what, you have to be very smart here when it comes to buying and selling. And we'll get into that probably in the second half. But when it comes to how you're going to handle this team, you really got to be honest with yourself. Yeah. You have to look in the mirror and you have to say, this is what we are. You can't keep going up and down. It's like eventually you have to just go on a huge streak. I said on that show, I didn't think that this team had it in them to win 15 of 17, to win 17 of 25. Like, I didn't think that they did, because we haven't seen it to this point. So why should I sit here and think that they would be able to do something like that, where it's been so hard to put everything together for this team? They start doing it. They lose the final 2. Now it's kind of like, all right, let's see where you come out of the break. But no matter what, you have to be honest with yourself. Do not do the things that we saw the old Mets do, meaning when they were 6 games back, way back when, and they decided to go after the likes of a Victor Zambrano and sell off Scott Kazmir and do stuff like that. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I'm basically saying, like, don't have that mindset when you're so many games back, and then willing to give things away. I don't think they will, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit, but that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I agree with that. And for everybody who's listening, Ibby's alluding to the fact that in the second half of this show, as we start to preview the second half of the season, we are firmly now in trade season, and we can talk about in general terms. And SNY Mets put out a tweet a little while before the show that I think we can talk about a little bit, but we'll talk a little bit in terms of generalities as where we think the Mets should go in terms of being buyers versus sellers, or some combination of the two, quite frankly, that they might need to be. That said, look, I don't necessarily agree with everything you just said, but I think you're entitled to that. I think anybody who feels that way is entitled to that. And I think these 2 comments, or rather really 3 comments from 2 people, kind of sum up the way that you and I differ and really my opinion. Jeff Cohen says, would have taken 4-2 on the road trip, but after sweeping Arizona, it felt like a letdown in San Diego. That's how I feel. If you told me the Mets are going to go 4-2 to end the season, to end the midway point of the season,
right,
on a tough road trip on the West Coast, playing, look, a team that's underachieving in San Diego, but super talented, and quite frankly, a team that's overachieving very much so, and also super talented in Arizona. I would have taken that. But the way that 4-2 came about, it did feel a little bit lackluster at the end. And that brings me to the next point, which is from Felix. The two games lost to the Padres, the Mets looked lifeless, saying, it's the difference between losing small and losing big. And I that's where I kind of say, it's like the saying about March, right? In like a lion, out like a lamb. That's what the Mets did.
Right.
The Mets went into that road trip like beasts. The Mets are back. The Mets are, the Mets can play with anybody. Look at the way they're playing. Look at the way they're pitching. And then,
right.
And so that was a bummer. Having said that, I think this final comment from Keith really sums up the rest of what I was going to get to, which is sometimes riding high before the All-Star game gets me nervous because they might fall flat after it. You go in with a ton of momentum.
Right.
Let's say the Mets win, 7, 8 in a row to close out the first half, and then they come out and they lay an egg. So maybe now it's like, look, they get this 6-game win streak. It gets snapped. They did lose a series, but now they get to break. They get to reset. And they know, though, that they can play with anybody when they're playing their best baseball. And hopefully, like Keith says, the players are fresh and they know they can win. So for me, those three comments really sum up how I feel about it. Like, it's good. I wish it was better. And I would have taken it, but I also understand that it kind of it ended with a whimper, and ending with a whimper always kind of sucks. Douglas Barnes agreeing with you completely, saying exactly, Ibby. And then we have Carson, former guest on the show, great content creator in his own right, saying Scherzer shitting the bed in the half finale was the letdown after the streak. If it was Peterson or Carrasco, the confidence level would have been different. That is another great point.
It's a great point.
Peterson losing, the Peterson game was 2-1, I think, right? Was that 2-1 final? Listen, Peterson did what Peterson could do. I know they pulled him early, but I would have pulled him too. I think, the peripherals around Peterson in that game weren't great. They also got a ton of length from their starters heading into that game. And so they could go into more of a bullpen game. People criticize Buck a lot for the bullpen usage, and a lot of times rightfully so, because I don't know that he's great at it all the time, especially when his back is against the wall. I think Buck is really good at it when things are flying high, when he's got Edwin Diaz and everything's making sense and Adam Ottavino's pitching like a stud like last season. Buck looks like a genius with a lot of those moves because most of them were automatic. When you start to put pressure on him, I think you start to see, okay, there's some wrinkles there. There's some kinks in the armor, if you will. And so I think this is a fair point. I didn't have a problem with him pulling Peterson when he did, but I did, Max Scherzer doing what Max Scherzer's done in big games. I mean, look, we're getting to the point now where it's not reactionary to say, Max has pitched arguably the worst in the 4 biggest starts of his Mets career. Last year against Atlanta, and then the Padres in the regular in the postseason, and then this year against Atlanta and against the Padres. When he could make a statement, he didn't. And he hasn't been bad. He's been mediocre this year, very up and down. But he's been bad the 4 times it's mattered most.
I did laugh at a tweet. I would pull it up or give credit, but I don't have it. But I did laugh at it where the person said that, Max Scherzer wants to get dealt to a contender, but the reason why the Mets aren't a contender is because of Max Scherzer. I did laugh at that. But yeah, it's unfortunate because, you bring someone like Max in.
That's another good one too. Max was bad against the Yankees also. Worth noting.
It's it sucks because when you bring in a player like Max with the pedigree that he has, you expect him to come into those big games and beat the Bulldog and carry you through them, and it hasn't happened. So it's hard to fault people for being pissed off or being put off when he's on the mound and thinking the worst, because to be honest, the worst has come through, or I should say has shined through in those games, because it just hasn't been there for him. And it's unfortunate. And, I'll save some of my thoughts on Max for more so in the second half. But it's going to be very interesting to see what this team is willing and not willing to do, depending on how they do. Really, I think coming out of this break, I know it was said before, I think Rael said it, it's very important to see how they do coming out of the break, hopefully in the first series to set the tone. I agree with that. And I think that really is going to tell a story in terms of how they might handle themselves moving forward, with being what, 2.5 weeks out from the deadline, whatever it may be.
Yeah, listen, and Douglas Barnes, this is absolutely true. Scherzer can't hold a lead. It's really gross.
Well, it's like every time he has that lead, you're up 3 runs. He hangs a slider, 2-run homer, and then next thing you know, he just gets singled to death. Another run scores, or there's an error, or Marte can't catch a ball, like whatever it is. It's like, okay, here we go again, and then it's gone, and then you put it back into the pen, and then the pen's getting overworked. It's just like it's that snowball effect that just turns to shit every time he's on the mound in that big game.
And it's weird, and we'll address these 2 comments, Ibby, and then we're over the 30-minute mark. I do want to get into our first half grades, but I do think that these 2 comments are something that's worth bringing up. First is a question from Carlos Ortiz, who I think this is the first thing he said in the comments so far today. So what up to Carlos?
What up, Carlos?
Do you think Scherzer is done? And Ibby, I'll say this before I throw it to you. I don't know. I truly don't know, and this is why I said earlier in this show, earlier in the season, that I thought it was too early to say Scherzer was done.
So did I.
And I still kind of think it is, because I know some people, I know what you're going to say, but this comment from Jeff Cohen, it also makes sense. Max has got to be better. How is he 8-3? When you look at some of Scherzer's numbers, it does not equate to a guy who is done. Now, does it equate to a guy who might be done being the Max Scherzer we all know? Yeah, that might be the case. But it doesn't, he can clearly still get people out. He has had stretches. He's had games here and there where he's pitched effectively, very effectively. He's had games where he's had high strikeouts and low hits, and he does have the 8-3 record. And I know win-loss record is not everything on a starting pitcher, but, he's had games. He doesn't look like a guy who is unpitchable in the league, right? There's done, and people might say this is semantics. There's done, and then there's done. I don't think he's cooked, but he might be done as an ace. Now, listen, I've often said it doesn't matter, especially if you're Steve Cohen, what you're paying a guy, but it does matter this season what you're paying Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander to be who they are supposed to be. If Max Scherzer is not an ace anymore, the Mets are screwed this year. If Max Scherzer isn't an ace anymore and they only have to ride with him as their 3rd or 4th starter next year because they go sign, I don't know, Aaron Nola or Ohtani or whatever they do, and all of a sudden Scherzer gets pushed down the depth chart a little bit, I think they're fine. I think it sucks they got to pay that guy $43 million, but it is what it is. But I think it's unfair to say he's done because, again, the example I always bring up is Chris Davis. A guy is only completely worthless when he's unrosterable. And to this point, Scherzer's not unrosterable, but I think it's also fair to say that without Verlander and Scherzer being who they've been their whole careers, the Mets aren't going to make the playoffs because the rest of their pitching is not good enough to hold the 2 people who are supposed to be aces that are pitching like 3 and 4 starters.
When you are paid the way that they are paid, you expect them to be a certain caliber. And I'm not going to say that Max Scherzer is done because he's not done as a pitcher. He's not done. I think he's done being paid at the clip that he's being paid at. Like what he's being paid for, what you think you're going to get from that player, I don't think that that's what you're going to get. So you can say, well, then you're not getting good ROI. You're not getting a good return on your investment. And it's not improper to say that now because of what we've seen against the bigger caliber opponents. Because again, we've said this before, it's a long season. You're going to pick and choose your spots with guys, whether they go 6, 8 innings, whatever it may be. But you're brought here to be that stopper, to be that guy to shut down the Braves, to shut down the Dodgers, to shut down the Padres, to shut down the big end teams, because that's where this team thought that they were going to be. And in order to get to the next step where you want to get to deeper into October, a championship series, playing for a pennant in a World Series, whatever it may be, You need that guy to be who he's being paid to be.
Right.
And I think at this point, I'm not saying he's done. He's not done. He can still go out there and pitch. But to think that he's going to go out there and to feel confidence, I'll put it that way, to feel confident with him going out there against the Dodgers, against the Braves, and think, oh, Max is going to go out there and do 7 shutout and strike out 10. Like, no. He might go 6, give up 4, and strike out 5. Like that's right. Kind of where
he might give you the other start too, but you can't bank on it anymore.
You can't bank on it anymore. You can't assume anything with him, which sucks for where this starting rotation is because you need him to do that.
And just to be clear, I don't know if I was perfectly clear in my stream of consciousness, because I don't want people to say that I'm contradicting myself. Again, I don't think that payroll for a specific player matters. I've always said that, guys, if you look at it in the scope of baseball reality, everybody's overpaid. And I think that going out and getting Max was the right move when they did it. I thought going out and getting Verlander was the right move when they did it. They didn't choose Verlander over Jake. Jake left. They go and they bring in Verlander. They needed top flight guys both times. And were you rolling the dice that these guys who were 39 and 40 were at some point going to, turn into pumpkins? Yes, you were rolling the dice.
Yes.
Was there a huge sample size that told you that either one of them were going to do that this year? No, not really. Not when you look at, what they had done up to the point they signed with the Mets. But again, like you said, and like a lot of people have said, I just think that when you look at what they were both brought in to be, if they are not going to be that this year, this team is screwed. This year, this team this year is the one that's screwed. I don't think long-term the Mets are screwed. It doesn't matter how much the Mets are paying Scherzer. It's clear, right? Yeah. Like, I know the Mets made like a small move to get Trevor Gott, but like, if money mattered, the Mets wouldn't have eaten the $4 million to take on Chris Flexen, to release Chris Flexen, to get a high upside arm in Gott, right? Like, they wouldn't have done that if they were shell-shocked by money because of all the money they spent.
Right.
So I know that's a small amount of money, but it all does add up. But I think that right now, if Scherzer is not Scherzer, this Mets team this season is screwed. Carson sums it up great, saying, I don't think Scherzer is done, but I'm definitely done with Scherzer at this point. Felix Ortiz saying Scherzer is a hired BB gun. And then we have Joe Pereno, former multiple-time guest on this show. Very funny comedian, saying, Glavine, Pedro, Santana, Scherzer, some Mets things never change. I think some of that's a little unfair. Pedro's first year with the Mets was very, very, very good. I also think
was appointment television.
Yeah, and I also think, listen, I know injuries happen, and that's a part of it, and you can't discount that from the conversation. But, if Pedro's healthy in 2006, the Mets might win the World Series. And I know health is everything, but
it is everything.
It is. Yeah. And the same thing with Santana. Santana pitched his ass off. Santana probably should have won a Cy Young that first season with the Mets. Mm-hmm. So, I understand the sentiment there with Joe. It's like they go and they bring these guys in. Other teams bring these guys in, and it's lightning in a bottle, right? We even had a guy like Kenny Rogers, and he was terrible for us. And then like 3 years later, he's in the freaking World Series, so I get it. I understand the sentiment. So I don't fault Joe for feeling that way. And by the way, Joe, if you're still in the comments and you want to throw some of your dates where you're playing next, we do have people out here in California, and I know he's going back east. Joe is super funny, and you should go see Joe wherever he is performing. You should follow him at Fix Your Life Joe on Twitter. He didn't ask me to say that, but he's a thoroughly enjoyable sports fan, and knowledgeable, and somebody who's super, super funny. So Joe, if you're still in the comments, throw in some of the dates where you're going to be either on the East Coast or out here on the West Coast. Ibby, that said, let's get to our grades. And when we do this, I encourage everybody to also not only agree or disagree, which I'm sure they will, but also put their own grades in for offense, defense, starting rotation. Oh, there we go. Joe Pereno at Atlantic City, August 4th through the 5th. Go see Joe. I encourage other people to put their grades out for offense, defense, starting rotation, bullpen, and coaching. Ibby, I'm going to pull up yours first, and we can walk through quickly what you think so far and kind of sum up your grades, your midseason report card for the New York Mets.
Ooh, that face is perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not great.
That face is perfect. So you want me to break each one down, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, real quick. We don't have to spend a ton of time. I think the grades kind of speak for itself, and I feel like,
Look,
other people are going to pretty much be in lockstep. Our grades are not the same. I can put up mine really quick, and then we can kind of talk about it. Some of mine are harsher.
Great.
Yeah, listen, they really sum up the vibes, man.
So
some of mine are harsher. Some of yours are harsher. It just kind of is what it is. So just like, if you want to pick out a couple and talk it out.
Yeah, just a quick overview of it. I said to John when he asked me, hey, what do you think of some grades? I'll make a graphic. I basically said when I first read the text, I was like, I want to be like Fs. And then I texted him, I'd be like, I could easily go Ds across the board, but I feel like it's kind of lazy. So instead, I threw in a couple C's instead, mainly because when I look at the offense and defense, I think it's very middling. I think the offense has kind of been there. I'm not going to run down all the stats that I looked up before, but when you look at their numbers overall, it's very middle of the pack or lower, like bottom half. Same thing with defense. Defense is kind of the only reason I gave them a C, honestly, like really looking at the team itself. A C for the offense is because Lindor, Pete, and Francisco Alvarez. When I look at the defense, it's mainly because of Lindor and Alvarez, because look, there's been a lot of regression across the board with a lot of people. I can also add Nimmo on offense and defense as well. I just seem like when you're watching these games, like I can't sit here and say B's or anything higher because it hasn't been that. The pitching has been god awful. I could have put an F on that. The starting pitching has been not good. It's failed for the most part. The bullpen, I could have went an F there. I could have easily gotten the F there, but I didn't put an F on the bullpen because that's, in my opinion, that's more on Billy Epler. I talked about that on the solo episode where it's like, what can I expect? What the hell can I really expect from a bullpen outside of the likes of David Robertson and Adam Ottavino, who are established guys who have a pedigree, who have solid careers in baseball? Like, you expect them to do well. David Robertson has been doing well. Adam Ottavino's been up and down this year. It happens with the type of pitcher that he is. You understand that. But when you look at everyone else, what am I supposed to expect from Jeff Brigham? What am I supposed to expect from TJ McFarland? Right. What am I supposed to expect from these guys? Like, Drew Smith is not a high leverage reliever, but he's used as one. Like,
a lot of these guys,
it's the definition of insanity.
A lot of these guys are not high leverage relievers. And we talked about that earlier in the season when the rotation, and this is what Stevie Mack is saying, the starting pitching hasn't helped the bullpen at all as well.
Listen,
I mentioned guys by name. Nobody thought Tommy Hunter, Jimmy Yacobonis should be getting meaningful innings out of this bullpen. But they did because they had to, because the starting pitchers were going 3 1/3, 4 2/3. You can't pitch. I know Carlos isn't here today, so I don't want to pick on him, but you can't bring in David Robertson in the 6th inning. You can't bring in Brooks Raley in the 5th inning. Now, sometimes you can, but you can't do it across the board. So yeah, I think that's a big problem, is that you had guys in the bullpen who should have never been. Look, I think in other teams, in other situations, maybe I think a guy like Jimmy Yacobonis could have been fine. I think Jimmy Yacobonis could have been a fine guy who pitches in the 5th and 6th innings sometimes, maybe gets a 7th inning because of matchups or something like that. But when he gets overused, he gets exposed. I think there was also stuff that you could argue from the coaching perspective. I've said a lot that I don't have a lot of faith in Jeremy Hefner, and I know Carson doesn't either. Who has he made better? Who has he gotten the best out of them? Nobody. So I see a lot of people's grades coming in. Ibby explained his. Let me get to mine, and then we'll touch on yours, then we'll head into the break. Look, I think for mine, a lot of the stuff gets bumped up or down by a player or two, kind of like what you were saying. Like, you could easily say C's across the board. You could say D's across the board. You could fail everybody. You could say F's across the board. I think you could say any of those, and I can understand why. For me, the offense is the definition of average, and to me, a C grade is average. It's right in the middle. I think the offense, that's where it is. I think there are a few guys doing a few things that boost it up. Obviously, the emergence of Alvarez, the power numbers and the RBI numbers of Pete and Lindor, the pretty steady season that Nimmo has had outside of a couple, fits and starts. And I think what we got from Tommy Pham. So I think, that's where you get the C. Then I think when you look at the defense, I could have went lower on the defense, to be honest with you. But I think that the Mets hit a stretch where they were pressing and playing badly across the board. Nothing was going their way. I think defensively, the Mets are a better team than they've shown. And I think that every team over the course of 162 hits a little bit of a weird patch defensively. I think Nimmo has made great strides. I think Pete is a better first baseman than people give him credit for. I think you can make an argument that Francisco Lindor is the best defensive shortstop in baseball. I don't know that he is one, but he's number one, but he's certainly in the top 3. You can't even put him anywhere outside of the top 5. I think Alvarez is a lot better than advertised. And I think, even guys who have had weirdly down years like Marte, Marte is a good defender, and I'm not sure that Marte is healthy. So I think there's a couple things that boost that up. When you look at the rotation, I went D+ because we've had some great outings from a couple people. Joey Lucchesi put up that great start. There's been a few highlight starts from Verlander, 1 or 2 from Max. Senga's been mostly good. He's been an all-star. You even had a weird start from Carrasco where he was lights out. So I think a couple of those things take it from a D flat or an F and boost it up
wild.
A little bit.
It is wild, real quick, not to cut you off, but it is wild that, the things that come into your mind right away when it comes to a season, and the fact, and it's not wrong on your end, but the fact that Joey Lucchesi's start sticks out to you speaks volumes about where the pitching has been this season. Not taking away from Joey because it was a great start, but the fact that that is like a staple of the season so far is really telling, in my opinion.
Absolutely. 100%. Because that should be like a good bonus moment. Oh man, you guys remember that Joey Lucchesi start?
Like unbelievable.
Instead, it's like one of the top 5 pitching performances of the season. It's probably not. It's probably in the top 10. But I'd have to go through and like list all of them when we don't have them in front of us. But it could be top 5. It's definitely like top 8.
Be. So, I think it might be.
And then to round out the rest, bullpen is a big F for me. I think the only reason why I almost went a little bit higher is because David Robertson, I think, has been great. Everybody else is underachieved. And then the coaching, to me, they've been below average. I don't think that the coaching staff is the problem with this team. And, I think some people are going to see that grade and think that I'm being a little bit of an apologist, and that's fair. But I don't think the coaching staff is the biggest problem. I think the coaching staff has been a problem because I don't think that they're getting the best out of guys. But again, Ibby, when you're talking about Jimmy Yacobonis, when you're talking about TJ McFarland,
how much you going to get?
When you're talking about, look, Tommy Pham's been great. Tommy Pham was signed to be a 4th outfielder.
Tommy Pham's been awesome.
And that's a credit to Tommy Pham for doing, there was a time when Buck had to play Tommy Pham every day because Mark Canha was terrible. So, I don't know, like a lot of their hands have been tied. So to me, they're below average. To me, a C- is a below average grade, Ibby, but I don't think they're the biggest problem. I really don't. We'll jump into some people's grades real quick before we go into the break. And I think everybody's pretty much in lockstep with us. We got David saying Mets front office, a big F. Douglas Barnes, C offense, C defense, F rotation, F bullpen, F- for the analytics department. Which is honestly, you could say that if you want to. Shay saying rotation was a C. Senga for him saved it from being a D. We got Carson, offense C+, defense D+, rotation D, bullpen D, coaching LMFAO. Which is technically a letter grade. So I can't argue that. Keith saying offense C-, very streaky. Defense B, bullpen D, starter C-, coaching C+. I think that's the closest to my grades that we've seen. And Carson saying Robertson is the bright spot in the bullpen, but he's not Edwin Diaz, so fuck him. It's just there because where would this bullpen be if they had David Robertson and Edwin Diaz?
Yeah.
And I understand that's the way you draw it up, but again, to your point on the front office, you really screwed the pooch on that one then.
Yeah.
Man, we're almost at an hour and we haven't even taken a break. Let's
go
take
to
a
the
break.
break. Go to the break.
I don't know what we're doing here. We forgot how to do this show. A lot of people are watching. We got people probably watching for the first time. The break is just a 10-second ad spot. I promise.
Hit the thumbs up.
Be right back. Hit the thumbs up while we're gone. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, Till Mets do us part. We'll be right back. just like that, we are back after the longest first quote-unquote half in this show's history. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, and of course, watching and interacting on YouTube is the best way to be a full-fledged participant in the show, because your questions, comments, concerns, your mid-season grades, all the stuff that we ask of you and all that stuff comes in real time, like PB saying Pham, Alvarez, and Lindor were the 6-game winning streak. So
the one thing I will say is, as much as I know the name does say PB now, but it's hard not to say Patty NYC. So as much as PB is there, it's like I still view it as Patty NYC.
I know. But, I'm just trying to shout them out based on the names.
No, I know.
It's
but so weird.
But no, listen, we appreciate everybody who tunes in. Of course, the best way to make sure that you don't miss an episode, and we're on, pretty much every Wednesday at 5:30 Eastern, barring something unforeseen, is to subscribe and turn notifications on. That will alert you to when our new episode and our new live stream is going to drop. If you can't watch the entire thing, we understand that when we go for an hour and 20 minutes, not everybody can tune into the entire episode, and that's cool. As soon as we end the live broadcast, this will live forever on that same YouTube channel, which is appropriately called Till Mets Do Us Part. And if you can't do any of that, you can listen to the entire show starting tomorrow, all courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network. Wherever it is you get your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more. Ibby, I think we can kind of sum up. We spent a lot of time talking about, where our feelings towards the Mets and a quote unquote second half preview. I think we kind of touched on in a way in what we talked about in the first half. So I think the best way or the best thing for us to segue into right now in this moment is this conversation about the trade deadline and the buyer versus seller aspect, and, maybe address that trade that SNY Mets put out. Would you trade Kevin Parada for Daniel Bednar and things like that? So just an overarching view for you of what you think the Mets might do, what you think the Mets should do, and then address that trade.
Well, that's the first time I'm hearing that. So the fact that you just said that, I have to ask one more time. You're saying that SNY put out a trade offer of
no, a trade, it was like a trade proposal brought up on Baseball Night in New York or one of those shows.
So some bullshit. Okay, so it was Kevin Parada from us going to Pittsburgh.
Yep.
For David Bednar, the closer.
Correct. Straight up, 1-for-1.
Fuck no. No.
Yeah.
No. That's stupid. I hate when, I love trade season. I love talking trades. Like one of
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do want to shout out this viewer who I don't think has ever has commented.
No, he was here last time. He was here.
Okay. Saying less than 2 hours is not enough. Love the show. Hit the like button. Thank you. I appreciate that. And please hit that like button.
I love trade season. I do. I love it. So I love talking shop on trades and seeing where guys can go, what things fit and what's proper and what's not, what makes sense and what doesn't. But I hate it at the same time because of, radio callers with stupid ideas. It's just nobody really thinks. And those radio callers are now getting jobs on television where they're putting out these same stupid ideas. It's like, you're not going to do that because bullpens are fickle.
Correct.
Bullpens are 1,000% fickle. I am not going to trade a prospect. I know a prospect could be great, could be nothing. I understand it. Prospects are lottery tickets. All right. You cash in your lottery ticket when you are ready, whether it is to help your team or to help you in another way by giving them away for someone else. This team is not a David Bednar away from competing. No. Not even close.
I may have called him Daniel Bednar. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but either way, I'm not giving away a player of that caliber, or I should say a prospect of that caliber, for a closer or relief pitcher in general. That is stupid. It makes absolutely zero sense. Now, before I even get into mine, I want to hear your thoughts on that proposal.
I kind of alluded to it on Twitter, and everybody who watches, if you follow either me or Ibby, our handles are right below our names. And, we're very active on Mets Twitter, as you could imagine, not only from the show's handle at Till Mets Do Us Part, but from our own, where we kind of save our own independent opinions. And I did tweet out, it's the kind of trade, in theory, that the Mets should be looking for. And what I mean by that is trading a prospect or two or whatever for controllable pieces That is a help you now and also help you next season. It's a nice resetting move.
Buying and selling. Yes, you can do that.
They buy and sell. It's
you can do that.
Maybe prospect that could work. Now, that said, it is something I would never do in a million years because philosophically, I am against, Ibby, trading any high value, high upside, high potential player prospect for a middle relief or relief pitcher. Because to your point, relief pitchers are fickle. Bullpens are fickle. This guy's great now. He might be terrible next year. He might be terrible for 2 years. You cannot trade straight up a prospect the likes of Kevin Parada for a relief pitcher. Now, if you're telling me you're going to get a starting pitcher, I'm going to start to listen. Now, I don't think Pittsburgh would ever do this. Somebody answered, I think your boy Tony Crooklyn said to me, if you say the Mets are going to trade Parada for Mitch Keller, okay, now I can start to entertain that. Are you going to get us a starting pitcher with control, like with controllability? Now I can entertain that because the Mets they're weak. They're thin in the starting pitching department.
Extremely thin.
So if you're going to get me a controllable starter, I can entertain that. If you're going to trade Kevin Parada and you're going to get, you're going to trade Kevin Parada plus. Right now, I understand this isn't going to happen because the Mets or the Pirates just signed Brian Reynolds, right? But if Parada and somebody else, maybe 3 people, right? A package of Mauricio Parada and then a lesser prospect gets you Bednard, Brian Reynolds, and something else. Again, something you can entertain where you're getting a position player back in an area of need where you're going to fill in the outfield. There are machinations of that trade in terms of controllability that makes sense. But a 1-for-1, you cannot do that. You cannot trade a position player prospect who projects the way that Parada projects. And like you, Ibby, I say they're all lottery tickets. I'm not a prospect hugger, but you can't trade that for a relief pitcher. Because to me, Ibby, a relief pitcher is less than a lottery ticket. A relief pitcher is something altogether. I don't even have an analogy for it.
Relief pitchers are week to week.
It's a firework. Yeah. You're trading it for something that's boom, boom. I don't know what I'm getting. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Is it the grand finale or is it just one little sparkler? You have no idea.
Right. And when you look at a player like Parada, I know people are going to say, oh, he's blocked by Alvarez. That's nonsense. Alvarez is a 21-year-old player prospect. Parada's not even here yet. They could be a catching tandem. He could be Alvarez backup for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Who knows? Also, Parada is athletic enough to play a different position.
He might be an outfielder.
That's what I'm saying. Parada he might be a left fielder.
He might be a corner outfielder. If the bat sticks. If the bat sticks, would be an outfielder.
So you simply cannot make that move. Absolutely not. That's it.
Yeah, it's just I hate, like I said, I hate things like that mainly because I don't think the people that are putting them out there actually take the time to look at things. They're not studying things. They're just seeing things as, oh, they have Alvarez. So it's that NFL mentality. It's like it's they think, oh, you have something at one position, so you don't need this one, so you can try to better yourself somewhere else. It's not how it works. Okay, just because you have a great catcher doesn't mean you don't go out and draft a catcher. They drafted Parada when they had the number 1 prospect in baseball, and everyone automatically assumed, oh, they're going to just take him to trade him. That's not how this works. No. You're attaining players to better your overall system. The same reason why people who were bitching about the draft this past week, this past couple of days when it's gone on, saying, oh, what are they doing taking a shortstop? I thought we needed pitching. You take the best players. You are building a system. You do not draft for need. You draft talent.
And shout out to Joe DeMeo and
always love
Connor Rogers. I listened to a bit of the Mets pod, and they talked about this. And he said, look, kudos to the Mets for the last and their entire development and drafting and talent scouting and evaluation department. The last 3 years, they have drafted the best player available with their first pick. They did it in Colin Hoke. They did it in Kevin Parada. And they even did it with Kumar Rocker. there were people that they did not think were going to be there when they picked, and they were the best player on their boards, and they took them regardless. And when you look around, guys, I don't need to tell you this. You're all baseball fans, but, Bryce Harper was a catcher. Now, I'm not saying Kevin Parada is going to be Bryce Harper.
No,
but Bryce Harper was a catcher. Kyle Schwarber was a catcher. Craig Biggio was a catcher. Todd Zeile was a catcher. Joe Torre was a catcher. These are guys that can go and play other positions. He might be a first baseman. Who knows? He might be a DH. Who knows? He could be a left fielder or a right fielder. We don't know, Ibby. It's too early to tell. And
also,
so
when you draft these kids, they're young, and you have to wait till their bodies fill out. And it's like, look, did anyone think that Ronnie Mauricio was going to be the size that he is now? They always say he was going to fill out. Do I think his future is a shortstop? I don't. Mark Vientos, another one, drafted as a shortstop. That guy's not playing shortstop. He filled out his body. He's playing a corner. He could barely move, but he was drafted as a shortstop. You don't know. So don't, wake the fuck up.
You don't know. Jacob deGrom was drafted as a shortstop.
deGrom was a shortstop too.
I didn't even think of all the converted catchers that turned into pitchers. By the way, Kenley Jansen is the one that comes to everybody's mind because he's been the most successful of that spot. But and look, Carson says it, and you said this, and you said it's not like the NFL, but I would say that this is true of every sport. You don't draft.
I should say it should be.
Yeah, yes. You don't draft for need. You never reach for need. You take the best player and then you figure it out. It doesn't matter.
That's
you take the best player always. So, look, I think the Mets, and James Dowling says it, look, I thought the Mets wanted to build the farm system, not make it worse. And I think that's the point here.
Yes.
And this is where we can take the conversation down a notch and really, talk about the strategy. And that's why I think that if you're saying that the Mets can get their hands on a controllable asset for whatever it is, right? Whether that's trading Tommy Pham if the season, goes awry, right? You want to trade Pham and unload him, or you want to package Max Scherzer and pay some of the money and get controllable pieces back or prospects back, fine. I think you can make an argument. I don't want them to trade Ronnie Mauricio, but you could trade a Mauricio or a Vientos or a Parada. Hell, I would entertain even trading a Brett Beatty in the right deal. Mm-hmm. The only prospect I'm not trading is Francisco Alvarez. But I would trade any of those guys to get a controllable, meaningful asset. But that is one that is going to help you in the short and the long term.
Yes.
And that is not a relief pitcher.
No,
you can get relief pitchers. You can buy them. You can find them. You can get them. You do not trade an asset. It's about asset allocation. That is how you build teams. And the only assets that a team has are player prospects and money. The Mets have plenty of money. They don't have a lot of player prospects they want to trade. That's why their deadline last year was underwhelming. I think this year, Ibby, it might be a little different.
I've been saying this. I've been thinking this. I don't think. I feel that what you said before is proper. Like, you can buy and sell, and I agree with that. Depends on the player, but at the same time, with where this team is and where I think they'll probably end up being, I don't think you're going to see higher end people within the farm dealt away. I think you're going to see the guys that should get dealt away. Meaning, I think Tommy Pham should be dealt. I think if someone's willing to take Mark Canha, you do it. If someone's willing to take David Robertson, you do it. If you look at,
let me ask you a question: would you do that even if the Mets are still quote unquote in it?
Like, again, like I said, it's that looking in the mirror.
Right now, they're about 7 games out of the wild card. I think it's 7 or 7.5. If we get to the week of the deadline, so a couple more weeks, and the Mets are 5.5 games out of a wild card spot, do you trade David Robertson? Because here's my thing, Ibby. Yeah. I think you can make a case that the Mets can still make a run if they trade Mark Canha. If they trade Mark Canha and Tommy Pham and they call up Ronnie Mauricio and Mark Vientos, I don't know that Tommy Pham has been great. But I don't know that either one of those players are better over the course of the rest of the season than what you could get from Vientos or Mauricio, right? So I think that you could not lose out there. But I think if the Mets trade Robertson, the Mets are selling. The Mets are not trying to win. I'm not saying that the Mets can't win, but to me, that is the one. When you trade your closer, your best relief pitcher, that is a move that's it.
I would say it based off of your scenario that you just laid out, they probably wouldn't, but I'm also thinking in terms of returns on things. Like Tommy Pham might get you a solid relief pitcher. Mark Canha might get you a C type arm prospect that you want to get in AA because you just want to have some depth. Like if we're talking about like returns, Robertson's the one or one of the ones that might be able to get you something. But I sit here right now and I do feel that with what you said is proper. Buying and selling is an opportunity and one that you should look at. But I still feel because that things can be in such flux with how this front office is and everything. I don't know if all things are going to be on the table. I think they want to continue to build the farm system. I don't think they want to take away from it. I think the types of deals that you would see if they tried to acquire things were going to be more so on the smaller end. Now, that completely changes if by some miracle this team goes on a run and they get into the deadline and it's like, oh my God, they're doing all these things. They're right in the hunt. And all of a sudden it's like, and then other teams fall and you can get a legit starting pitcher that you can have for now and for the foreseeable future that you can extend all those. Like, that's a different story. I don't think it's going to be there.
No, I don't think so either.
I'm just saying, like, I think that the selling aspect is where this team's mindset should be at the moment. At the moment, like, look in the mirror and say, who are we? This is who we are. This is who we are right now. It's the truth. You've seen more than enough. This is the type of team that we are. Right now, I'm going into it saying, what pieces are we going to try to sell off? And then go from there and see where you are, and then make a further determination if you're going to go beyond and sell more pieces. I will say this right now. I don't know what you would get even if you pay everything, but I wholeheartedly think that the Mets should trade Max Scherzer. I do.
Okay.
I will say that wholeheartedly. They won't.
They're not going to.
They won't do it, but I would.
Now, why would you? Because I agree. I would. And I think if you paid, I don't know, I'm making up a number, 75% of the remainder contract. So that means, you're paying with the rest of this year is not that much, right? Like, cause he's already played over a half a season. So you cut that deal in half.
Right.
So if you pay, let's say all of the option next year.
Well, that's a player option. So
that's true.
He doesn't have to do, and this is part of my
right. I forgot it was a player option. Yeah.
If
so they'd have to pay, they would have to pay the rest of the deal.
You pay the rest of this, right? My thought process is if he wanted to parlay it and say, look, I just bought a house here on Long Island. I wanted to stay here. But if you deal me, maybe we could work something I can come back after the fact. I would pay everything that he's owed this year. I would package it with something else. And then to try and better my returns in that case. Because if you can get something that is of, again, B plus type prospect, you're not going to get much. Even if you pay it all, you're not going to get much. But I would take something. And then if you really wanted to say to me, hey, look, we can revisit this in the offseason. When you take your player option, you can come back and we can try and figure something out to give you some more. I don't know if they would even want to do that. I'm not sure if I would want them to do that.
Well, and that's the question that I have to you. Like, I'm not opposed to trading him at all.
Yeah.
But my question is, all of these machinations, and people in the comments, please chime in. I'm not saying Ibby's wrong. My question is, with all of those potential machinations that you would need to do to make it be worth it, is it even worth it? Like,
where they come in.
If you have to pay his entire salary to get back maybe a B prospect, is that worth it? If you have to pay his entire salary and attach, like, do the version of the Trey Turner Max Scherzer deal that's not exactly a 1-for-1 because the Mets don't really have a player on their. Let's say the Mets traded Max Scherzer and they put Brett Beatty in the deal to get back like a great prospect or something.
Okay,
is that worth it? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Prospect is.
Right.
Who the prospect is.
Now, if you're telling me you're going to get a high-end pitching prospect, they're not going to, it's not going to happen this way, right? Because it's not going to be with the Washington Nationals. Like, this doesn't make sense. He's just a person who comes to mind because he went in the deal. But like, if you told me you can get like, you're going to get a pitching prospect the caliber of a Josiah Gray, right? Like, if you're telling me you're going to get that level of prospect because you're giving them, Brett Beatty in the deal. Right. You're going to get that team's, 20-year-old stud, lights out arm, maybe he's in AA, whatever, but that's the kind of player you're going to get. Mm-hmm. Then I would entertain it, but I don't think you're getting that. I don't think, because the problem is that Scherzer has not been good enough to get you that. It goes back to what you said in the first half. Scherzer's the reason the Mets aren't a contender, at least one of the big ones. And so is a team who is a pitcher away going to take Max Scherzer even for free and take another player with upside and give the Mets anything of significance? See, I don't think they can. I would, but I don't think they can do it.
I think you would. This is why I say you have to have this thought process of selling, because I would be working the phones now and getting a feel to try and start laying the groundwork for potentials when it comes to teams that do need help pitching. But again, like I said, Max Scherzer isn't that over the hump type of guy, but an arm that can help nonetheless. So that's why I said on the solo show when I mentioned teams like, whether it was the Dodgers or more so the younger teams like Cincinnati and Baltimore that are, I'm not saying you're going to get one of their top prospects. You're not. But if you're able to throw a Max Scherzer into, I like using Cincy as the example because I do think that there is a fit there. Like, I see the talent that they have there, and Hunter Green's going to come back, and Nick Lodolo's going to come back by August, and they have Abbott who's doing awesome. And then if you plug in a Max Scherzer in there while also attaching something else that can sweeten the pot to get something a little bit better in return, do I think that that kind of makes sense if you're paying everything? And to answer the question that was said in the comments, asking if would Steve Cohen pay Max Scherzer to play for another team? I say the answer is yes, if it helps make the Mets better in the long run. I don't think that is ever going to stop anything. I think utilizing money is a big thing. That is what is made the Mets able to do some of the things that they've done to this point. I look at the draft. I know that the draft is set money, but the fact that they're willing to pay out overslot for a Colin Hoke because they know they're going to go college heavy the rest of the way because they have all this cash and they're going to say we're going to give it to this guy. Then we'll go like. There's ways. They even gave a six-figure signing bonus to that earlier today to the undrafted dude, the pitcher. Forgot his first name, Hawkins. His high upside arm, a lot of strikeouts, like 90-something strikeouts in 70 innings or something. Like just live arm, undrafted guy, but they're giving him a six-figure signing bonus. So it's like the money thing is not the money.
Steve
Money's
Cohen,
not an issue.
Steve Cohen from January to like June of this year made the Mets payroll at .72. So everybody wants to talk about the highest payroll in baseball and this
Doesn't
and that.
Matter.
Guys,
playground.
At his other job, he's already made that money back. And that has nothing to do with the Mets. Now, I understand, you don't intermingle finances and stuff like that. That's always been the Wilpons thing. And you don't, right? That is a separate business. But Steve Cohen is worth 7 baseball teams. Like he's worth so much money that it doesn't matter. I want to ask you this, Ibby. First of all, before I bring up this question, because I think it's an important one. Do you have time to talk for like another 20 minutes? Because I know this is what's going to happen.
20 minutes, maybe 20 is pushing it.
Okay,
20 is pushing it.
Let's try to get through this conversation as quickly as possible because it started off by Douglas Barnes saying no one is untouchable for the right price. Okay. So I would like you to just give me your current Mets on the 26-man roster that you think are quote unquote untouchable. People Ibby, would not trade from the 26-man roster. Only the 26. I'm not talking about Mauricio. I'm not talking about Vientos.
Yeah.
Not talking about Parada. Only from the 26.
I would not trade Francisco Alvarez. I know this was a huge talking point brought up by John Manconi over the last couple of days prior to the break. I would not trade Pete Alonso. I understood what he was saying. I get what he was. I'd rather say. I understand what people were saying. I'm not saying you're wrong. This is just me. I get the sentiment. I really do. But I'm not trading him. Obviously, Lindor's not going anywhere. Nimmo's not going anywhere. Edwin's not going anywhere.
Right. Technically, he doesn't count because he's on the 60
because he's not there. But you get that. If the deal is proper, which I think it could be, I wouldn't have an issue getting rid of Beatty. But I still really like him, and I think that it's one small tweak within the swing that he can become something more. Sure. But I won't include him in this list, and I don't think I'm missing anybody.
I think you're missing one person in our list.
Who did I miss?
Senga.
Oh, so, yeah, I'm sorry, it's Senga. Yes, yeah. It's Senga.
For me, that is the list because I do. Yes. I in theory, I agree with Douglas Barnes that nobody is untouchable for the right price. Some of this is personal bias. Some of it is Mets long time bias and things like that. My untouchable pieces are the same ones that you mentioned. Alvarez, to me, unicorn player that doesn't really exist anymore. He is a catcher that can hit 30 home runs. There's maybe one other guy in the league that can do that right now. Two other guys in the league that are that caliber of player. And the fact that he's this young doing it, to me, Alvarez off the table. I, like you, would not trade Pete Alonso. I've understood why Keith brought it up. I understood why John Manconi brought it up. I get it. You missed the window to sign Pete cheap. Now you're going to have to sign Pete for big money, and you're probably going to have to overpay for years where Pete isn't as good. But to me, I think we're watching in real time the best power hitter, all due respect to Darryl Strawberry, that the Mets have ever developed. And I think that he has potential to be, because of that power ability, no disrespect to David Wright, the best hitter the Mets have ever drafted and developed. And I don't think that you trade that guy because he's a linchpin to this team.
Plus, people bitch about power. You want to get rid of the power now?
Correct.
It's the one guy who hit home runs.
Listen, Carson is going to tell you how important it is to pull the ball for power if he's still in the comments. You can't trade that guy.
He is. He is. To me, great comment.
Yes, exactly. That's a perfect comment. Alonso, Lindor, Alvarez, Nimmo, Senga, Diaz, the rest can eat shit. That is the list. Again, Diaz, the one for me that I didn't mention only because he's not playing actively. But yes, Diaz is included in my list. So I don't trade Alonso. I don't trade Lindor because I think Lindor is, first of all, he's, nobody trades that contract. You're not going to do that. But also, Lindor is one of the players that's the heart and soul of this team. Nimmo, same thing. They just signed him to that deal. Nimmo's the kind of guy I think his talents will age well. He can play left field later on in his career. It's not really a big deal. And then Senga, you just signed. He's been your best pitcher. You're obviously not trading him. For me, those are the only untouchables. The only ones. Everybody else, everybody else is open for business. I would trade Beatty in the right deal. Somebody brought it up. I would trade Jeff McNeil. I like Jeff McNeil. And I know Carson is probably going to say, trade this guy because he doesn't pull the ball. And that's fair. Listen, Jeff McNeil, if he's hitting 320, is great. Jeff McNeil, if he's hitting 260, I'll trade. I don't care if they just sign him. I'd trade him tomorrow.
Make sure you head over to Mets Weekly Pod. They talked about Jeff McNeil in length. They put out some good points as to why they would deal him. I don't want to spoil anything, but make sure you head over to their channel. They put out some good stuff on that if you're curious on some potential trades and what he might even bring back. So shout out to them on that.
Yeah, listen, Carlos Ortiz saying, isn't Jeff untouchable? And I don't think he can be. And it goes back to what I said to you, Ibby, earlier in the season and in the offseason when we were talking about who are extension candidates. We talked about Pete. We talked about Jeff. You said you put out a couple of different times what you would offer Jeff as an extension. The Mets actually got him for below that. It's a very team-friendly extension. And when they did it,
trade.
It's easy to trade. And when they did it, we both praised them. We said, hey, good.
Yeah.
But what was my point the whole time? Jeff is a late blooming non-prospect that became a very top-tier player in terms of a couple of tools, you can allow that guy to go through arbitration. Jeff McNeil was not going to be a free agent till he was 34, 35 years old.
Yeah.
You could have just not extended him. Now, give them credit for extending him because it is team friendly and they could trade him. But that's how I feel. I like Jeff McNeil. He's one of my favorite players on the team when he's doing the stuff that he needs to do. But when we're talking about a potential lost season and you're talking about an over 30-year-old player, Ibby, he can go. You got Ronnie Mauricio. You can play Ronnie at second base. And I know he hasn't looked good at second base, but Jeff McNeil can't be. If a team wants to give you a prospect because they think they can get Jeff McNeil back to the batting title, Jeff McNeil, you can do that. You absolutely can do that. I like Jeff McNeil a lot. He is not untouchable. He can't be. Cannot.
I know it was mentioned by Carson in the one video. Like I said, I don't want to spoil too much, but I the idea of like packaging McNeil to go to Baltimore kind of makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah.
And I say Baltimore because they have some people that I wish the Mets can try and get their hands on, specifically in the outfield. But yeah, I think it makes sense. I do. Everything should be on the table. Everything. The reason why we say untouchables is because we as fans grow attached in a sense of what we believe a player can be, and we want that player to be on our team because we love watching them.
That's
it's
why
normal.
To be totally
normal
fair,
fan behavior.
That's why I've restated my love for Jeff McNeil. I like Jeff McNeil. I do.
Right.
And I think he's
Jeff's
a good
on. Yeah.
And he's had a terrible year by his standards, an absolute dog shit year. I picked him at the beginning of the year. I said he could win the batting title again. I like Jeff McNeil a lot. I don't think Jeff McNeil is cooked. You know, Carson jokes around saying, hey, I refuse to address that noodle loser second baseman anymore. Look, he doesn't like his game, and I appreciate that. I do, and I think he can right himself.
Yeah.
But you need to your point, separate what you're willing, like your love, separate your head and your heart. I like Jeff McNeil. I think he's still got a role on this team. But if there's a team like Baltimore that comes over and they want to give me a couple of prospects for Jeff McNeil, tomorrow, I trade him tomorrow.
Yeah. And like I said, this isn't saying you're going to get much. And to answer the questions from before, do you think it might have been Keith who put it in? I'm not sure. Talking about like the likes of Scherzer, is a B prospect better than a C/D version of Max? Based off this season, for me, yeah, I want to get more talent, more youthful talent within this system. That's what I want. And when you have a team that's not doing well, or it's very mediocre, or it's up and down, but you have guys that can help someone else and it can in turn give you something that can help you tomorrow, or like when I say tomorrow, I mean the next season and moving forward. For me, when you're building something, that's what you should be doing. If you have something that you know is not going to be with you the following season, Tommy Pham is doing fantastic. He is. He's doing great. I love watching it. Guys, he's got a good story, busting his ass, putting up solid numbers, one of the better hitters over the last month and a half in baseball. Good for him. Should he be here after the deadline? No. No, he should not. Let a contender take that hot bat. Let them give you something in return, and you can move on to the next. Keep working within your own system, developing your guys, calling them up, let them play and see what they have. So then you know what you're doing moving forward so you can attack the offseason better. That's what good teams do. That's what you should be doing.
Stevie Mack saying Mauricio waiting in the wings makes McNeil expendable. Plus you have Jet Williams and Hulk, who will eventually be up in the future.
I think Jet's been working the outfield, but still, I get the point. I do.
Right, yeah. And Carson is saying, but for real, McNeil is great when he pulls line drives, but his bat speed and control will only regress past 30 years old as pitch velocity elevates day by day. I mean, that's a fair point. Here's my last question to you, Ibby, and we'll get out of here.
Yeah.
And it's just about the trade deadline. I wanted to talk draft. I had this whole slide pulled up about the draft, but honestly, there are people who know the draft better. The intriguing names for me are obviously Houck, Sprout, and the two-way player.
Brandon Sprout. Shout out to Carson. Big day for him. Big day.
Yeah, listen, those are the three important ones because nobody thought Houck was going to be there. They drafted Sprout last year, and they went and took him again, so clearly they like him. And then Nolan McLean, somebody made a comment earlier. He's a two-way player, and that's always intriguing. You're going to get it.
Shout out to Stevie Mack on that one because he sent me a text on Instagram saying how the Mets fans want Ohtani and the Mets fans say we have Ohtani at home. And then they that so I did laugh at that. That was a shout out to Stevie on that. That was good.
I did want to address that because I said we were going to talk about it on this show, and the show has gone in a different direction, which is fair. That's how this show goes. It's all live. Yeah. We do it. We don't have any scripts, and so we just roll with it. But here's my last question to you. Would you be willing, if you're going to take on, like you talked about packaging, max paying money and things like that.
Yeah.
Are you still in the camp? Would you be willing to take on a contract to get a better player? Or would you be willing to take on a player that doesn't have a place? So like the two names that come to mind immediately, one comes with a lot of money is a player like Christian Yelich.
Right.
And then there's a team that you mentioned that, because of other players have come up, he might be losing his spot. A guy like Jonathan India, who doesn't make a lot of money, but might not have a place in Cincinnati soon. So would you be willing to take on a player, whether they make a lot of money or they're not an exact fit? Again, like, I don't know how India fits on this roster unless you trade McNeil and da-da-da-da. But, like, would you be willing to take on people in the right deal?
In the right, yes, absolutely. If I had to take on someone that's on the back end that's making a lot of money, but it gets me another player, yes, I'm for that. I'm not going to complain. Like, I don't understand why Cincy, because I know there has been talks like Jonathan India is having a solid and good year for them, and he's one of like the staples of their clubhouse. So I'm not sure why they would want to get rid of him. I love Ellie De La Cruz. I love Matt McLean. I know that Christian Encarnacion Strand is there, but Votto's still doing well. Like there are things amongst that team that they can do, and they can have it all if they want. Just got to move some guys around. They can have it all. So I'm not sure as to why they would want to. Would I take a Jonathan India? Absolutely. He's a great ball player. I would love to have him. But I don't think that's likely. But to your overall idea, yes, 1,000%, I would do something like that if it makes sense player-wise. That I'm getting as to why I might be taking on a contract or taking on a player that's longer in the tooth, if you will.
Yeah, I'm inclined to do the same, and I understand that that's maybe going to be counterintuitive to some of the people that listen and watch the show, where they say, look, you're taking on more money, you're taking on older players. Because, Ibby, I do think, jokes aside, I think that baseball is won by young, athletic players.
Agreed.
That's how you win baseball games now. So that's why, that's kind of why I brought up a guy like Jonathan India. He's 24 years old. You know what I mean? You give me a 24-year-old everyday player. Sure. If you're trading McNeil to Baltimore and then you take India to, give me that guy every time. Give me a young guy with tools.
I guess I said on the one show, I said that, what is the difference between what the Mets are and how they're playing versus the teams that are doing really well this year? And I brought up Baltimore. I brought up Arizona. I brought up Cincinnati. And it's like, what do those teams have? Youth.
The Mets are old.
The Mets are old.
Yeah.
They're old.
So listen, Patty reminding us 20 minutes. We've done 20 minutes. Listen, that said, Ibby, because this is my final thought on it, because Steve Cohen has a ton of money and money is irrelevant. I think if you're doing it the right way, you can take on money. So, we use Yelich as the guy, right? Because everybody knows, Milwaukee would get out of that deal in a heartbeat, right?
Yes.
If you could get a player, if you can get a Corbin Burns, if you can get some high prospects, whatever, and you could take on Christian Yelich, knowing that maybe Yelich becomes your DH. Maybe Yelich
He's having a good year.
That's what I'm saying.
He's having a good year.
Yelich is not the player that he once was.
No.
But also Yelich's contract relative to the big money deals that players are signing now is cheap.
Yeah. It's cheap.
So, if you could trade Max and take on, like, there are machinations that make sense. Or, like I said, if Yelich comes here and you DFA Vogelback and you think that you could keep Yelich healthier if he doesn't play the outfield, and all of a sudden you have a bat behind Alonso who hits left-handed, okay, I can entertain that conversation. So I'm with you. In the right deal, I would take on money for an older player or an underperforming player, even though I understand that youth is ultimately the way to go. Because I think the Mets' problem right now, Ibby, is not one Christian Yelich. The Mets' problem right now is 5, 6, 7 guys who are league average or below. The problem is not that the Mets, like, people keep talking about, oh, it's a good thing the Mets didn't sign Kyle Schwarber because look at where his average is and stuff. Well, listen, Kyle Schwarber, if he was in the Mets lineup, wouldn't be the problem as much as Mark Canha for most of the year, as much as Daniel Vogelback, as much as Escobar before they traded him, before he went on that little part-time hot streak, as much as Jeff McNeil not being McNeil, Marte. Like, it's guys who are league average. There's 6 guys every day who are below league average players in terms of their numbers. So one guy who might be overpaid is not going to be the problem. It's the 6 guys who are overpaid, to a lesser degree, that are the problem. So, that's kind of where my thought process goes. Carson saying Cohen will buy him a new back and Yelich will go to pulling fly balls again. Listen, that said, Ibby, thank you for giving us an extra 20 minutes. Do want to congratulate Pete and Senga for making the All-Star team.
Absolutely.
That's great. Pete deserved it. Lindor deserved it too. Fuck baseball. They don't know what they're doing. Those jerseys are ugly as shit.
Ugly.
It's dumb. They should wear their own jerseys. Put an All-Star game patch on them. Even if you want to sell jerseys, aren't you more inclined to buy a Mets Pete Alonso jersey with the All-Star patch on it than that non-Mets jersey that's the ugliest thing you've ever seen?
Didn't it used to be where they would wear what they're wearing, like the national? Didn't they used to do? I don't know if they did, but I thought at one point they did that during the Derby. Like, why can't they do it during the Derby?
Yeah, they would. It was reversed because now they wear their regular uniforms during the Derby.
Right.
But they should wear those uniforms during the Derby, during all the other things, the media days and stuff, and fine. But Ibby, I have never once in my life looked at an All-Star game jersey and said, oh, I need to have that. Even when there were All-Stars on our team playing in the All-Star game at Citi Field.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't like, oh, I need the Matt Harvey Citi Field. Like, no. Give me the jersey. Give me the Mets jersey. I don't know. Yeah. That said, yes, this is important for all of us. Keith saying, check out the giveaway from the QBC for Till Mets Do Us Part. I know you have all the details on that.
Yes, just make sure that I'll put on another one, because basically when Keith said that I could gave me the okay on that, that's when like Twitter went to shit. Like when it came to like when it went to like the whole rate limit and all this stuff, like everything got fucked up with the timeline. So I'll put it out again. It's basically if we can hit a certain follower number I should say a subscriber number when it comes to the YouTube channel, we'll give away. Correct me if I'm wrong, Keith. I think it's 2. If it's not, I'm sorry. I think it's either 1 or 2 tickets to the QBC with Howie Rose, which I will be hosting July 29th. Catch a Story at Queens. We'll make sure we pump that out over the next couple episodes as well. It'll be a good time. But once we hit, I think I put it at like 400. I think that's the number, because things have changed with the algorithm and YouTube in terms of monetizing. I'll fill you in on that, John. Some things have changed for the better for us, which is good. So if we get a certain number, we'll be able to, give those away and, have some fun. You can see my mug, have some fun with me, and it'll be good.
Listen, that's everything the QBC does is great. I've been a part of a lot of different things. I did the lunch with Keith Hernandez a couple of years ago. I hosted the full QBC the last 2 years. Keith, Dan, the whole team, everybody's great. Ibby's going to be great hosting the lunch for with Howie Rose at Catch Astoria. It's going to be intimate. It's going to be smaller than the regular QBC. I know so many people love Howie, and you should go out and see that for sure. that's it. We've done an hour and a half of this show. I think next week it's kind of supersized because we hadn't been able to talk. So now I think we can get back into our regular rhythm. By the time we do that, the Mets will have started to play series again, which is great because I think baseball comes back to Friday, right? The Mets play on Friday.
I think it's Friday.
Yeah, the Mets play on Friday against the Dodgers out at Citi Field. So thanks to everybody who watches live. Thanks to all the comments, especially from the folks who are always in the comments, and especially from the folks who have been guests on this show that tune into the show live, like Carson and Joe Perino. And, we really appreciate everybody who does it. Thank you for adding so much to it. Carson also said he's going to do a breakdown of all 23 of the Mets draft picks coming up in the next couple of days. So you can look out for that. Follow him. That's the stuff. Listen, there are people who know prospects and college baseball players better than me and Ibby, and we admit that. And that's the places you should go. And when we have time and we're not in the thick of, trading season and stuff, we'll get, Carson back on or Joe DeMaio back on. We'll talk about, that stuff with them as well. So we appreciate everybody watching. Subscribe, hit the like button on your way out. And of course, if you don't have a chance to watch us here on YouTube, you can follow us at Till Mets Do Us Part, at John Sapanaro, at Poison_Ibby. And you can listen, subscribe to the audio version of this show, courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network, wherever it is you get your podcast. That's all. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.